The PS2 video game adaptation of the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man film from 2002 is a bit of a weird oddity. On one hand, it made an attempt to move things in a new direction, while on the other, treaded water and refused to let go of the past. Its graphics were next-gen at the time of its release, but its gameplay was almost completely recycled from the PS1 Spider-Man games. I have a feeling that a sequel to Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro might have been in early development before the decision was made to turn it into a movie license game instead. The similarities this game shares with its PS1 predecessors are most apparent in the outside levels, the big open areas. While you're web swinging, Spider-Man's web doesn't appear to be attached to anything, just floating miraculously in the air. You need to find pickups to replenish your health and web meter, which there is only one of now. And by the way, doesn't make any sense because this Spider-Man had organic webbing and didn't need a web fluid. If you get too close to the ground in this game, you die, something that may have been excusable in the previous games, specifically the first one that gave an explanation for it in its story, but here it feels unacceptable on this new hardware. All of the web-related moves carry over from the PS1 games too. The stronger blast of web called the Web Bomb, the explosive area-clearing Web Dome, and the Web Fists that increase Spider-Man's melee damage. There was an attempt to add in more gameplay features though, and I can't ignore that. You actually have a wide variety of combos you can perform, unlike in the PS1 games, with more being unlocked as you progress through the game's story and collect glowing gold spider icons hidden in the levels. Web swinging has a default speed, but now you can adjust it by holding down the R2 button to go faster. Using this is necessary to beat some of the timed hostage and race sequences that happen late into the game. Spider-Man the movie implements this targeting mode, or camera lock function that you use to quickly fire web shots at flying enemies. Because this game is filled to the brim with various forms of them, it's kind of overpowered because you can abuse it to do a lot of damage very fast, but at the same time you do run out of web more frequently and are forced to temporarily retreat from combat to find more, though again, this incarnation of Spider-Man shouldn't have to do this, and it's something that will always be on the back of your mind. The auto-aim function with the web swinging has been removed, and in its place is one for web zipping, that you activate by pressing the right analog stick. Not only does it allow you to get past certain obstacles like steam coming out of pipes or flaming debris, but also quickly maneuver yourself in the game's new stealth-driven sections, which honestly are not very fun. You don't get to take out enemies, but rather have to avoid them entirely, sticking to the shadows. You need to collect pieces of door codes, or be guided by a scientist to mix chemicals. None of it is very exciting. Being that this game is on the PS2 and not the PS1, it gets rid of the directional pad as your means of controlling Spider-Man, in favor of analog control, which does not mesh well with this kind of gameplay. When you're playing the exterior levels, swinging around the city and running across rooftops, it's fine, because there is a lot more space at your disposal, and the camera is much easier to orient. But in the interior levels, the narrow hallways, the restricted stealth sections, this game can be a miserable bitch to play. Spider-Man the movie does a pretty good job adapting the origin of Spider-Man seen in the film. It starts off immediately following the death of Uncle Ben at the hands of a carjacker. Peter puts on his crude wrestling gear and goes out into the city to search for Uncle Ben's killer and enact his revenge, which happens during broad daylight in this game and not at night like in the film. The killer is the leader of the Skull's gang, and through interrogating one of the gang's members, Peter learns that the killer is hiding out in a nearby warehouse. He goes there, and after defeating him, realizes that he was the same robber that had stolen from the wrestling promoter that had cheated Peter out of his prize money that he had let escape earlier. The killer then dies when he stumbles and falls out of the warehouse's window. Shaken up by the ordeal, Peter remembers the words of wisdom spoken to him by Uncle Ben, that with great power comes great responsibility. Peter vows to use his powers to fight crime as the masked superhero Spider-Man. The first two villains you encounter in the story are Shocker and Vulture, who team up to rob a jewelry store. One of them escapes by air, and the other escapes in a van. Spidey goes after Shocker first through the subway, and then into the sewers. At the subway station, you have to rescue security guards and civilians from Shocker's goons. Once you do, Spidey takes a few classic shots at Shocker, calling him Quilt Man and Padded Pete, before the villain uses his Vibro Smashers to damage one of the station's support pillars, endangering the life of a man below. This guy is one of the dumbest motherfuckers I've ever seen in a superhero game. How on earth could he not hear such a loud and powerful blast of energy like that, even if he's on his dated early 2000s era cell phone? Also, he's got all the room in the world to run and get out of the way, not just stand there like an idiot. Spider-Man's chase of Shocker leads into the sewers. This level is one of the more layered and extensive in the game, having you retrieve a few keys to open doors and press some switches. One of Shocker's goons even turns on a pressure valve to block your way to his boss, and then rips it off the wall, forcing you to hunt him down to get the handle back. Kinda fun and kinda annoying, just 'cause it's a bit like a maze and the asshole runs away from you like a little bitch. Eventually, you are led back to some subway tunnels and have to skillfully dodge Shocker's energy blasts. It becomes harder and harder to avoid them the further down the tunnel you go, and if you are hit, they do a lot of damage. But once you get to the end, you reach your final showdown with Shocker. He not only fires concussive blasts at you, but will also spin around in a tornado that sucks you towards him, so attacking him from a distance is the best course of action. Once you defeat Shocker, he tells you where you can find his partner. The first level of Vulture's section of the story is one of my favorites in the game, but it's also one of the more difficult. He has turned an old clock tower into his lair and nest of sorts. Your goal is to climb to the top of it, going around and around the giant stairwell. The higher you go up, though, the more obstacles that are put in your path. You have to avoid mines, thrown grenades, robots that chase you and explode when they get too close, and when Vulture gets annoyed at you, blows up a portion of the tower which catches fire and has a swinging pillar suspended in the air by nothing. When Spider-Man reaches the top, Vulture's workshop, he mentions how hard it must be for him to carry groceries up, one of his funnier quips in the game. The villain manages to escape, though, and the following level is a chase through the city. Make sure you are speeding up and slowing down with your web swinging when you need to, and watch out for the electrical bombs Vulture detonates behind him, and the green feathers he launches at you. You will also need to repair damaged billboards and water towers along the way that Vulture uses to distract you. I like how this level has overcast, with some rain coming down, and in the next level, the boss battle against Vulture, it's during a thunderstorm. You can see lightning strike the Chrysler Building, though the rain isn't as heavy as you would expect. So the next villain you encounter in the game is Scorpion. Oscorp has been developing a human performance enhancer that would become the Goblin formula, just like they do in the film. But unlike the film, they study Spider-Man, as he already exhibits what they want to achieve with this serum, and believe the secret to it may lie in his DNA. They send deadly robots after him called Hunter Killers that you need to destroy in aerial combat near the MetLife building. Eventually, a bunch of spider robots are sent out by Oscorp to track down and capture Spider-Man, but instead locate the Scorpion because of his similar arachnid DNA. I like Scorpion's design in this game, modeled after the Roxxon oil armor he had in the comics, and the same costume he had in the original PS1 game, but I don't really get his deal in this story. I'm assuming his origin is similar to the one in the comic books, involving J. Jonah Jameson and experimentation of some kind being done on him, but none of it is explained in the game. He's just hunted by Oscorp's robots, becomes extremely paranoid by it, and when Spider-Man tries to help him, he just believes he is out to get him too. Scorpion is easily the weakest villain in this game. The context, the reason for him to be here, is almost non-existent. His boss fight is decent though, taking place in the same subway station as earlier, with him jumping around and clinging to walls. You need to make sure to avoid his tail laser he charges up though, because it does crazy damage, can basically one-shot you if you aren't careful. Following your encounter with Scorpion, Green Goblin finally makes his debut in the game. We see Norman Osborn ousted by the Oscorp board members, taking things into his own hands and exposing himself to his untested super soldier serum. The transformation sequence is very similar to the one in the film, with Norman throwing Mendel Strom through the glass and stealing Oscorp's prototype glider and flight suit. Green Goblin attacks the World Unity Festival, and one of his pumpkin bombs weakens the balcony Mary Jane is standing on, causing her to fall. Thankfully, she lands on the only balloon the festival could afford, and you will need to swing to it quickly, pick her up, and drop her off on a nearby rooftop. I always found it funny how the balloon just falls as the two are talking, and you can hear the screams of the civilians below, but Spider-Man just ignores it.
You were great back there.
Thanks. I have to go deal with, you know.
Oh, yeah. Thanks again.
No problem. Grab hold of a rogue balloon anytime. Rescuing damsels is my specialty.
Anyways, once Mary Jane is safe, your first battle with the Green Goblin is underway. Now, this game is always eclipsed by its far superior sequel that many still consider to be one of the greatest superhero games ever made. Even Spider-Man 3 gets more attention than it because of its obvious graphical enhancements, but Spider-Man the movie doesn't get the respect it deserves in relation to its execution of the Green Goblin. Not only does Willem Dafoe reprise his role here and give it his all, which is entertaining as fuck, but from a gameplay perspective, this may still be the best Green Goblin we've ever had in video games, as of the time I'm recording this. I know this game is old, but if you look at all of the Spider-Man games that have come out since its release, the ones that feature a Green Goblin on a glider, none of them offer the level of combat features this game does when fighting him. Not only can you shoot webs at him while he's flying around, but in some of the battles you have, the last two, he gets off his glider, which will come after you by itself with its machine guns if you dawdle too much. On the ground, much like in the film, Goblin is a lot stronger than Spider-Man, and you will get your shit kicked in by his devastating combos and chokeholds if you get too cocky. Not to mention, he still lobs a variety of pumpkin bombs at you that explode in a variety of ways. If you hold X near him while he's on his glider, you can also mount it and begin punching him until he fights you off, which is really awesome. All I'm saying is that it's pretty sad that this PS2 game provides a more engaging Green Goblin fight than 99% of the other Spider-Man games out there that feature him, even the ones that aren't Spider-Man focused.
I've offered you the world and you've thrown it away. Well, I'll cure you of your deluded ideals soon enough.
Save it. You're done.
That's what you think. I've arranged for a little parting gift. Throughout downtown are bombs have planted filled with a deadly gas. When they go off, well, use your imagination. You might be able to stop them, or you can try to stop me. The choice is yours, hero.
Anywho, after defeating Goblin at the Unity Festival, he begins fleeing just like Vulture did, and also like Vulture, distracts you by structurally weakening things you have to repair within time limits. Eventually, the Maniac offers to ally with you, just like he did in the film, but Spider-Man refuses, so Goblin reveals he has placed bombs all across the city, and gives Spider-Man a choice to either disarm them or go after him, and this brings us to one of the hardest sequences I've ever played in any superhero game, the level Race Against Time. It's not very long, but man is it infuriating. You have to disarm 4 rooftop bombs within a very strict time limit by following your compass. It seems easy enough, but you essentially have to be swinging at max speed between each one, and the faster you web swing, the less control you have over Spider-Man. If you swing into the path of any robots or spotlights, you're a sitting duck, or I guess spider, as they just hack away at your life bar within seconds with gunfire, turning Spider-Man into Swiss cheese. I hate this level, and I'm sure everyone who has played this game hates it too. Following Race Against Time in the PS2 version of Spider-Man the movie, you just move on to the next level in Green Goblin's mission chain. However, Xbox players got 2 additional levels in between, centering around Kraven the Hunter, that were exclusive to the console. Lucky bastards. Kraven is hired by Osborne to capture Spider-Man. He is offered money, but instead agrees to do it for free, living for the thrill of the hunt. The first level has Spider-Man navigating a series of deadly traps while poisoned that Kraven has set for him, and the other obviously features his boss battle, where Kraven temporarily becomes invincible by drinking potions. I think the Xbox version is the definitive way to play this game. Unfortunately, I don't own an Xbox, so any gameplay footage I use for this section of the video will not be my own, but I will credit the uploader. J. Jonah Jameson also appears in the cutscene setting up these levels. He doesn't appear in the PS2 version of the game at all. So after you disarm the bombs in the city and or take on Kraven the Hunter, depending on which version of the game you are playing, you confront the Green Goblin yet again, but this time have to deal with his pesky razor bats. The level is called the Razor's Edge, and you have to destroy 50 of them to succeed. You can fire quick web shots at them, or if you are low on web fluid, you can just destroy clusters of them using your cannonball kick. When all 50 razor bats are destroyed, you have to make your way to a nearby construction site to hide from the rest. They just keep coming, swarming you like bees. It's here where one of the weirdest and most confusing parts of the game happens, a visual mistake that always takes me out of the storytelling. After the Green Goblin flies away, Spider-Man picks up one of the broken wings of a razor bat, which looks humongous, much larger than any of the razor bats you had fought throughout the level. Later, in his room, Peter looks at the wing through a microscope to discover its Oscorp origins, that the Green Goblin is somehow associated with the company, but in the cutscene, the wing appears really small. I honestly don't know how this mistake was made. It's so strange. Anyways, this Oscorp clue is what leads Spider-Man into infiltrating the laboratory, having you play the annoying and clunky stealth levels I mentioned earlier. You uncover a top-secret weapon Oscorp is working on called the Super Mech, and have to put it out of commission by destroying all of the power generators in its hangar. This level can be tough, because if you get hit by the Super Mech's energy cannon, it kills you in one shot. Spidey reaches the office of Norman Osborn and finds files containing photos of Mary Jane. He knows the Goblin is going after her. Mary Jane gets kidnapped by the villain right out of her apartment, and you have to follow him in the most challenging chase sequence in the game, which feels like something stripped right out of the comic books. You need to move fast, and it will probably take you multiple attempts to learn which directions Goblin flies in. He's very erratic. And then finally, you have a final face-off with him on the Queensboro Bridge. Goblin unmasks, revealing himself to be Norman Osborn, begs Spider-Man to not tell Harry about what he's done, and attempts to kill Spider-Man with his glider, just like in the movie. Spider-Man dodges it, Norman is impaled, and then tragically dies. I always wondered what he was trying to accomplish with this. Yes, it would kill Spider-Man, but even if it did, wouldn't it then crash into Goblin anyways? It would turn them both into a shish kebab.
Tell Harry I'm sorry.
The original Spider-Man games on PlayStation had what-if modes you could play following the story that provided alternate universe scenarios, sight gags, and character cameos you could find. Spider-Man the movie doesn't have this, but in its place, it gives you the option to play as Harry Osborn, who finds his father's Green Goblin equipment. You can fly the glider around, use its machine guns, release razor bats, throw various pumpkin bombs, and of course, battle enemies on the ground. Honestly, it's very unique. What other Spider-Man game lets you do something like this? The levels play out the same as the ones you do with Spider-Man, but there is different context to everything, different lines of dialogue, and when you fight Green Goblin, the voice heard is much scarier and sinister than Norman's. I think it's supposed to represent the evil side of his father's personality, or the darkness trying to influence Harry or something.
This is where your ideals have got you. Come on, Osborn. Let's see what you're made of.
I've never played through the full game as Goblin though. Flying around is fun in the outside levels, but the novelty of it wears off pretty quick when you move on to the interior ones. They feel even more restrictive than they did playing as Spider-Man, and since Harry can't climb walls, trying to stick to the shadows and the stealth levels is damn near impossible, and not fun at all. Flying the glider makes that clock tower level with Vulture a breeze though. It's hilarious how quick you can beat it. Spider-Man the movie may not be that remarkable in terms of its gameplay. I think by the time the PlayStation 2 rolled around, gamers were expecting a lot more out of it, but I think what is here isn't half bad. It does a decent job adapting the events of the film. The stuff with Green Goblin, I would argue, is some of the best we have seen from the character in video game form, and the elements it does borrow from those original PlayStation games can be fun, because those games were awesome. But it was definitely a transitional period for Spider-Man games. This kind of gameplay was treading water, and in just a few short years following this, everything would be expanded upon. You'd be able to swing off buildings and walk around on the ground. Games would start following a more free-roaming structure, as opposed to being strictly level-based. Nothing would be the same again, really. I enjoy playing Spider-Man the movie and do revisit it from time to time, but I don't think it has aged as well as a lot of other Spider-Man games have. Not only is it just a movie licensed one, so there's a lot of stigma associated with it for that alone, but it also copy and pasted a bit too much from what had come before, without doing anything that new or extraordinary in return, which is why it's forgotten the most out of the trilogy. What are your thoughts on the game, though? Do you like Spider-Man the movie? Did you grow up playing it? Have you ever played it? Let me know in the comments section below. I want to thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to support the channel and ensure the creation of more content like this, make sure to subscribe, click that bell icon for notifications, and become a producer over on patreon.com/channel NerdGasm if you can. I will see you all in the next one. Take care, stay safe, and always stay nerdy. Much like the film it was based off of, which is hailed as one of the greatest superhero movies of all time, the Spider-Man 2 game, released in 2004, is widely regarded as one of the best video games ever produced, centering around our friendly neighborhood wall crawler. But after 16 plus years since it came out, does it still deserve that distinction? Does nostalgia play too heavily into these beliefs, blinding people towards some of the game's flaws? To a certain degree, I think so. For many of us, it's been years since we've played this game. A lot of us probably don't remember much of the negatives associated with it, focusing mainly on the positives, the good stuff. And I mean, I don't blame you. That's kind of how nostalgia works. But my goal with this video is to try to take a very neutral stance with everything, leave my personal nostalgia at the door as best I can, and provide you guys with a very objective video review. Now, of course, I will be sharing many of my personal opinions and feelings towards this game too, that's a given, but I'm not just going to gush over it the whole time. The game isn't as perfect and flawless as the vast majority of the internet makes it out to be at times, and again, I think nostalgia plays a huge factor in that. Before I get into the nitty-gritty, I will just go out and say that yes, Spider-Man 2, as a game, as a superhero story, still holds up rather well, and yes, I still believe it's one of the best Spider-Man games of all time. How does it compare to the other titles on that list, though, after 16 years? Well, let's take a look and see. Spider-Man 2 expands upon the story depicted in the film. It centers around Peter having to balance his personal life with being Spider-Man, and all the problems associated with living these two identities. He struggles with his schooling, always late or absent from class, managing his responsibilities, working for the Daily Bugle newspaper, and finds it difficult to make it on time to see his friends, Mary Jane Watson and Harry Osborne. Being a hero, being Spider-Man, gets in the way of being Peter Parker, and the game really nails this idea. The strength of the Spider-Man 2 game's story is really the same strength that the film had, this focus on Peter's double life, having him forced to balance his civilian life with being Spider-Man. The focus on this balance, on these personal dilemmas, is the heart of the Spider-Man character. It's what made the comic so likable, relatable in the first place, and it's why this game works so well, why it's such a great Spider-Man story. Now, comparing it to the film, the game is missing one key element, the moment when Peter loses his powers and stops being Spider-Man, referencing the events from the iconic 1967 storyline, Spider-Man No More. But I think we can all understand why this was not featured in the game, because that wouldn't be fun to play. You want to be Spider-Man. You want to be able to swing around the city and beat up bad guys, not hang around on the streets for hours on end as Peter Parker. So yeah, the game doesn't include a part that has Peter lose his powers. It doesn't stop you from being Spider-Man, because that would suck. But what it does do, in its place, that the film didn't, is provide us with a morally corrupt element, an unrighteous component that draws Peter to the dark side, if you will, pulling him closer to the idea of being Spider-Man full-time and essentially giving up on being Peter Parker, which I find to be very fascinating. Peter has a crush on Mary Jane Watson. He wants to be with her, but as long as Spider-Man is in the equation, he's constantly letting MJ down, and eventually she slips through his fingers and decides to marry astronaut John Jameson. Enter Black Cat, the master thief Peter is introduced to when he stops a museum robbery earlier in the game. You encounter her several times throughout the narrative, chasing her down in cat-and-mouse sequences on rooftops. She aids you in locating and taking down super criminals such as Herman Schultz, the Shocker, and at one point even uses you as a distraction so she can swipe a rare gold statue being stolen by some criminals. Throughout this story, Black Cat tries to persuade Peter to give up his civilian life in favor of being Spider-Man, the exact opposite of what the film tries to do. She wants him to forget about all of his responsibilities and just have fun with his powers, realize how special and superior he is to everyone else. Of course it doesn't work, and Peter is able to focus on what really matters, but the fact that this game manages to discuss the central themes of Spider-Man 2, do it in a way that incorporates elements from the film, but also provide us with something different too, I think that's really impressive, especially for a movie-licensed game released in 2004. On top of all the stuff discussing responsibility, Spider-Man 2 obviously incorporates Dr. Octopus into the story as well. He was the villain of the movie after all. In the game, the origin of Otto Octavius is basically the same as the film. He is a nuclear scientist who creates a powerful fusion experiment funded by Oscorp, hoping that the unlimited energy it creates can be used to power New York City. He miscalculates, however, and the fusion reaction becomes unstable. Spider-Man is able to stop it, but not before it kills Otto's wife Rosie, and destroys the inhibitor chip, which blocks the robotic arms used in the experiment from taking over Octavius's nervous system with their artificial intelligence. Otto becomes the villain Dr. Octopus and confronts his friend and scientific colleague Kurt Connors, telling him that he intends on recreating the experiment. He steals money from the Bank of Manhattan to fund its reconstruction, and then goes to Harry Osborne in order to get the fuel for the fusion reactor, the isotope known as tritium. In exchange for it, Harry orders Otto to find and capture Spider-Man, whom he blames for the death of his father, and wants to kill firsthand. This leads to MJ being kidnapped by Dr. Octopus to draw out Spider-Man, a fight on a subway train, much like the epic one in the film, and the final confrontation between the hero and villain at Otto's waterfront laboratory, resulting in Doc Ock's defeat, his sacrifice to shut down the fusion experiment once and for all, MJ learning of Spider-Man's secret identity, and her leaving John at the altar in favor of being with Peter. All is good in the end. What this game does with Dr. Octopus and how it adapts the events of the movie is pretty damn good for a game at the time on PS2. His motivations to fight Spider-Man are essentially the same as the film. He does it so he can get the tritium to recreate his experiment. Also, because Spider-Man keeps getting in his way, and he blames him for the death of his wife Rosie, though clearly he is just blinded to the fact that his own miscalculations resulted in that. At the end of the game, when you confront Doc Ock in his lab, and he learns that Spider-Man's true identity is Peter Parker, he goes one step beyond the movie, telling Spider-Man that he will kill MJ in revenge for him killing his wife. It's an eye for an eye. Fighting Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2 can be really fun and really challenging. In order to damage him, you have to first web down all of his robotic tentacles, pinning them to the ground so you can go in for a few haymakers. You are constantly having to watch to see which tentacle is about to attack you. Be ready to hit the circle button and dodge it, and fast enough so you can then hit triangle to web it down. If you are too slow with any of these steps, you will either simply miss webbing it up and get the chance to run away or reposition yourself to try again, or the worst case scenario, be grabbed by one of them and take a fair bit of damage. Battling Doc Ock in this game keeps you on your toes. It can become quite nerve-wracking at times, mainly due to the fact that there is almost always outside interference in some way. In the bank fight, he brings multiple goons with him that fire these grenade launcher weapons at you, which you have to keep an eye on while avoiding Dr. Octopus, who take them out as quickly as possible so you can then focus all your attention on him for the remainder of the battle. The train sequence can also be distracting because you are battling Doc Ock on moving terrain. If at any point you are knocked off, you have to find your way back on, as the train makes its twists and turns, and then jump over the gaps on top to reach the villain and try the whole process all over again. The bend in the train closest to Dr. Octopus is always a pain as well, because for some reason you can't run over it and have to jump, which puts you in a vulnerable position for one of the arms to grab you. And finally, the last battle with Dr. Octopus in the rundown warehouse has Doc Ock utilize all 4 of his tentacles at the same time. The fight in the bank only used 2, because the other ones were allowing him to walk around and cling onto the walls and ceiling, and on the train, 2 of them were used to keep him grounded. By the game's end, you really have to have the dodging and webbing down, because you have to have all the tentacles trapped so you can attack Otto before the first one breaks free. So if you are too slow and keep missing your openings, you might find yourself in a constant ballet of dodging and webbing, with no end in sight. The boss battles with Dr. Octopus in Spider-Man 2 are still the best featuring him from any video game in my opinion. I know Insomniac's Spider-Man had a much larger and epic confrontation with him at the end of that game, but if you've seen my review of it, you would know that I was somewhat disappointed in it, because it seemed to focus more on the cinematic feel of everything and less on the actual gameplay. Here, in Spider-Man 2, it really pushes your gaming sensibilities to their limits, truly tests your spider reflexes. Yeah, this version of Dr. Octopus in video game form isn't as good as the one in Spider-Man from 2018, but gameplay-wise, he is far more engaging and challenging as an enemy. I hope you agree. Another one of the central antagonists in Spider-Man 2 is my main man Mysterio, and you knew I was going to talk about him in this video. I think the character is done amazing justice in this game, and the way Treyarch depicts the villain is quite brilliant. They make Mysterio appear to be an alien from outer space, leading an invasion of the planet Earth and terrorizing the citizens of New York City. Mysterio is just a man, a special effects artist named Quentin Beck, who would challenge Spider-Man to a series of games to prove himself superior to the Wallcrawler, proving that he is a fraud. After suffering an embarrassing defeat, Beck assumes the identity of Mysterio, this creature or otherworldly being taken right out of those classic science fiction space movies, and I think his design in this game makes sense. It would be something a special effects artist from the film industry would dress up as and use as a cover if they were to become a costumed supervillain. In the game, Quentin Beck provokes Spider-Man, forcing him to compete in a series of challenges at the sports arena, which I believe is supposed to be Madison Square Garden. Donning a costume similar to the one he had in the original comics, Beck flies around on a jetpack, and he and Spider-Man race each other to throw as many criminals into padded pits as possible in the allotted time, to show which one of them is better at rounding up criminals. Beck believes that if he wins, without superpowers, he will prove once and for all what a sham Spider-Man really is. If you get through the first challenge, you must then face off against Beck in a giant floating obstacle course, staying out of the path of the electric cannon he is controlling on the other side of the arena. Once you make it through the course, you win, and Beck is defeated. Later, he returns as Mysterio, in the form of a giant hologram, and attacks the Opera House, forcing Spider-Man to take on his mechanical robots and save the innocent people put in harm's way. At the Statue of Liberty, Beck uses advanced hologram technology to make it look as though aliens have tampered with the monument, turning it into a giant statue of Mysterio. Spidey makes his way to the top of it, takes out the brain, and puts an end to all the illusions. He then confronts Mysterio at his hideout, hidden deep within an unassuming apartment, only to find himself in some bizarre funhouse. At the end of it, he reveals Mysterio as the fraud, finding computer equipment and yet another hologram. It's at this point in the game that you think all of the stuff with Mysterio is over. For a while he isn't mentioned, and you go about your other hero business. That is until Mysterio decides to rob a convenience store, however, and you come face to face with him for the very first time. The game builds him up as this epic battle, showing you 3 separate health meters for Mysterio filling up. You think it's gonna be a real challenge, only for you to punch him once, and Beck falls right on his ass, giving himself up to Spider-Man, and being revealed as the one behind all the alien shenanigans. As much as I would have liked to see a standard boss fight with Mysterio, especially seeing as he is my favorite villain of all time, I think what they did with him here, essentially making him a joke at the end like that, was a lot of fun, and made his appearance in this game far more memorable than it would have been had he had your typical run-of-the-mill boss encounter. Quentin Beck in this game is very childish, a whiny bitch when he doesn't get his way, feeling everything is unfair. He wants to prove himself better than Spider-Man, wants to show the world how phony Spider-Man really is. In many ways, he is insecure about himself. Not having superpowers of his own makes him feel powerless, weak. So he spends a little money, fluffs up the myth a little bit with all these crazy visuals and eye candy, making him appear far greater than he really is, or how he feels he is deep down. But what makes it so funny is that all the challenges you face up until the moment in the convenience store, it's like Beck burned through all of his resources, blew his load, and he's bled white. He's got nothing left to offer. He's forced to get his hands dirty now, do stuff himself, but all he's really capable of is holding up some convenience store for what really boils down to peanuts at that point. He went from tampering with the Statue of Liberty, making it a statue of himself, to holding up a convenience store for chump change. It's hilarious. Not only does the joke battle with Mysterio work in terms of story, but I also think it works when you look at everything else going on in this game. Dr. Octopus takes center stage in terms of boss battles, with his being the most challenging hand-to-hand encounters you face. You've also got stuff with the Rhino and Shocker thrown in too. I don't know if having a Mysterio boss battle was entirely necessary. Not to mention, some of the challenges you do with Quentin Beck are fairly lengthy, and take up quite a large chunk of this game. They have multiple stages to them. The one at the Statue of Liberty specifically is probably the most frustrating part of this entire game too, at least for me. Swinging up to the top of the statue, making sure you connect with each floating device without falling into the water, it can be tricky maintaining the height you need all the way up. And once you get to the statue, you have to maneuver yourself around it, destroying these globes, to turn off a force field so you can attack the brain, all while dodging these spinning blades surrounding it. Yeah, it can be a real pain in the ass. I think following the whole Statue of Liberty brain thing, which basically acts as Mysterio's boss battle, let's be honest, the player is pretty worn out from all the challenges Beck had you face. I don't think they needed to add more to it and have some lengthy boss encounter thrown in on top of it. It was unnecessary. Besides, all of these challenges combined, they had some variety, and they were satisfying. I didn't really need anything more. The funny boss battle they included with Mysterio, it was great. It made his appearance in this game far more memorable than it would have been had they not done it, and it went against everyone's expectations. It was a fun surprise. And with that, this brings me to one of the biggest elements of this game that made it so revolutionary at the time of its release, a fully open-world New York City, one you could swing from and walk on. It was simply incredible. Prior to this game, 3D Spider-Man games had featured levels, sometimes involving interiors, but mostly taking place on rooftops. The city streets might have been visible or grayed out, but you couldn't walk on them. You would die if you got too close. Or in the case of Spider-Man 2, Enter Electro, there were moments you could walk on the streets, but they were within self-contained levels, only stretching a few blocks, if that. In Spider-Man 2, all of that changed, and for the first time ever, you really felt like Spider-Man navigating the city, and there was a lot to do in it. You had the main story sections, of course, but there were also various collectibles to keep you busy, and even side missions provided by civilians you could take on to earn hero points, allowing you to purchase a bunch of cool upgrades. As Spider-Man, you could also deliver pizzas, and oh boy, that pizza song, it still gets stuck in my brain. Let's talk about the web swinging in Spider-Man 2, because I have quite a bit to say about it. While I think it's fun, and it definitely has its charm, it was very addictive at the time, I feel it has aged pretty bad over the years, following the release of many other newer Spider-Man games. Your swings get interrupted constantly, whether you hit into a wall, scrape the top of a building, or make contact with the ground. It disrupts your flow and momentum at times, which can become quite annoying. You also have to manually latch onto a surface with a button press following a web zip, where most Spider-Man games now do that automatically, which is how it should be. Being that this was the first Spider-Man game to start using this more realistic web-swinging system, the developers really tried their best to make it the most realistic as possible, almost too realistic if you ask me. Not only does your web swinging get interrupted frequently, but your webs don't register and latch onto buildings as much as you'd want them to, because in this game, you really need something close by to connect to. If you're too far away, your webs won't work. Now, I know this is still a thing in Spider-Man games. You have to be close to surfaces in order to swing off of them. It makes sense. But a lot of the newer games utilize simple tricks and illusions, so to speak, to remove a lot of the more frustrating elements from web swinging. The flow of your momentum isn't interrupted nearly as much as it was in Spider-Man 2, nor do you find yourself clipping off walls or the ground as much either. Developers have found ways to make this system more accessible and simple, and it's why newer Spider-Man games are so much better in the web-swinging department than Spider-Man 2 was. I still enjoy Spider-Man 2's web-swinging system, but it is dated and rough around the edges. It was a solid foundation that later games would vastly improve upon. I think one aspect of Spider-Man 2 that makes me hate on the web swinging as much as I do is the fact that a lot of the story and side missions involve time limits, stopwatches that force you to get from point A to point B in such a hurry. Because you're in a rush, under pressure, you tend to make more mistakes, and the irritating elements I just mentioned regarding the web swinging just snowballs onto your already rising frustrations in some of these sequences. It's just not that fun. When I think of Spider-Man 2, I think of timers, time limits, because that's what you face almost as much as you're fighting the other villains in this game, like Doc Ock. The stopwatch is a supervillain in and of itself. Another weak point of this game are the side missions from civilians you are forced to do in order to earn hero points that allow you to progress in the story and get to the next chapter. While they may have been a fun little distraction back when this game came out, now they are very shallow, tedious, and extremely repetitive. As you progress through the story, a few mission types are thrown into the mix, but the vast majority repeat over and over again, saving some construction worker from falling or taking them to the hospital before the clock strikes 0, retrieving stolen items taken by a group of thugs, stopping a car chase, that sort of thing. Again, back in the day, this stuff was a lot of fun and made you feel like a real hero, Spider-Man coming to the rescue and helping these civilians with the problems they had. But I find these missions have aged terribly and are easily the weakest aspect of this game, in my opinion. The civilians are so robotic, the voice acting is subpar, and the actual tasks you are sent out to do are rarely interesting, especially after you do them 50 times. The main story missions are where this game shines. It's just unfortunate that in order to get to each one of them, each new chapter, you have to complete several of these dull and monotonous side missions to earn enough hero points. Now mind you, for most of this game, after you complete the main story mission in each chapter and take out the bad guys associated with it and whatnot, you do earn most of the hero points needed to unlock the next chapter, and just have to make up the difference with the side missions. Simple as that. But sometimes a chapter will consist of only a cutscene, that's it, and then you have to earn all the hero points the chapter requires of you, so you can advance to the next, which is really frustrating and seems like a big waste of time. In fact, this kind of issue was a problem in Treyarch's next Spider-Man game released the following year, Ultimate Spider-Man. I remember that one having a lot more chapters that were like this, just cutscenes, though it did provide you with a bit more to do, which helped alleviate some of the repetitiveness. Something I have yet to mention in this review is the combat system found in Spider-Man 2, and I wanted to discuss it briefly here. While it's got nothing on the Batman Arkham games, it can still be quite addictive. I brought up the fact that you hit the circle button to perform dodges when you need to web up Dr. Octopus's tentacles, but the rest of the combat scenarios play out in a similar way. Counters can be performed with a simple press of the circle button when you see the prompt above Spider-Man's head, in the form of his spider sense. You can then do a wide variety of combos to incapacitate your foes, and even utilize web attacks if need be, and can unlock more combos at hero point stores located throughout the city. If you find yourself in a tight jam during combat, you can also activate Spider Reflexes mode by pressing L1. This slows everything down around you, which can give you a much needed advantage in a fight. To replenish your Spider Reflexes meter, all you have to do is perform a variety of acrobatic moves, trick jumps, fancy web swings, that sort of thing. Even if you don't focus on filling the meter, you'll find that it will gradually fill up as you play the game. Doing acrobatic moves becomes second nature, and you don't even think about it after a while. There are a few sequences in this game that can be rather challenging though, and you'll want to make sure to have Spider Reflexes in your back pocket when they pop up. Ever since its release in 2004, despite countless other superhero games coming out in the last 16 years, Spider-Man 2 is always praised as one of the greatest superhero games in the genre. Everyone looks back on it with fond memories, and compared to a lot of other superhero, movie-licensed offerings at the time, Spider-Man 2 stood head and shoulders above all the rest. There was no competition. And because of that, because it stood out, I think it helped prolong interest in the title, extend its lifespan, even years after it was released. Spider-Man 2, this movie-licensed game released back in 2004 in the heyday of the PlayStation 2, earned a lot of respect from the gaming community. For many people, it was the first superhero game that made them go, whoa, this shit can actually be good. Compared to a lot of newer superhero games, and with all nostalgia aside, Spider-Man 2 has become rather dated, let's be honest. I think a few of its elements have aged rather poorly. They're not as fun as you might remember, and I do believe, at this point, it is no longer the best Spider-Man game, though I don't really know how many people still regard it as such following the release of Insomniacs in 2018. Though the web swinging can be frustrating at times and the combat even a little unresponsive here and there, it's not perfect, Spider-Man 2 was a lot better than it had any right to be. It accomplished so much at a time when superhero games, especially movie-licensed ones, were in the gutter essentially. The question is Spider-Man 2 still the best movie-licensed superhero game? Maybe. There have been a few other standouts that have come out over the years, but which one managed to adapt their films as effectively as Spider-Man 2 did, and provide us with new context, new ideas? It's a toss-up and easily debatable, but I personally would still go with Spider-Man 2, as of right now.
The two unidentified men are holding police officers at bay. Reports say... Wait. One of them appears to be writing a message. In a web.
Considering the harm these two have already done, this reporter fears no one can stop them. Not even Spider-Man.
Peter.
Spider-Man 3 is one of those superhero movies that could have been so much better than it was, if not for studio interference. I think the vast majority of us would call it a disappointment, the weakest of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, and I think the same can be said about its video game adaptations when compared to those made for the two previous films in the series. The one released for the PlayStation 2 especially is pretty rough revisiting it today. Coming off its predecessor on the same console, which is still considered by many to be one of, if not the, greatest movie-licensed superhero game ever made, Spider-Man 3 is a huge downgrade in terms of quality, both in a technical sense and a graphical sense. It looks like it was released before Spider-Man 2, not after it, which is insane. Everything in this game, from the character models to the environments, looks so washed out and bland. There is an emptiness to the whole thing, a lifelessness. Some cutscenes use the in-game models for its characters, at times appearing as though textures are missing, whereas other cutscenes are stripped right out of the game's next-gen version, just with much shittier resolution to them. It all comes off as very cheap-looking and rushed. Gameplay-wise, Spider-Man 3 on PS2 is just okay, sufficient. It does the job it's intended to do, but not much else really. The web-swinging system has been somewhat updated from what was in Spider-Man 2. It utilizes the same control scheme as that game, more or less. Web swinging is done by pressing and holding R2 before releasing it, and you need to ensure you have buildings nearby that you can latch onto. The web zip has been reassigned to R1 instead of hitting the two larger shoulder buttons at the same time, like in Spider-Man 2. Something about this web-swinging system feels off in this game though. It's like the game is holding your hand throughout the entire process, like you stretch and snap in certain directions, and the arc to your swing is predetermined, with an invisible barrier, so as not to have you hit the ground as much, like in the previous game, and maintain your momentum. It's hard to explain, but here, you don't feel like you're in full control of Spider-Man. He tends to go in directions you don't want him to. Everything about it just feels sticky. The combat system in Spider-Man 3 isn't phenomenal, but halfway decent for the time. It's simple, fun, and can be satisfying. Definitely the strongest aspect of this game, in my opinion. You've got the standard web-related attacks in your arsenal to spin enemies around and slam them into the ground. Larger enemies can also be webbed onto for consecutive mounted punches. There is an emphasis put on a vaulting move that has Spider-Man jump over his opponent's head. From it, you can perform quick strikes or web up their face, whichever you prefer. Some of the smaller enemies are hard to hit normally, and vaulting over them is essential to do any significant damage, but you'll come to find that the vault move is sorta broken. You can cheese it to land cheap strikes and rarely get hit. During some of the boss encounters, it's the best way to do damage without taking any yourself. Because of this, I don't find the combat system in Spider-Man 3 to be all that engaging. It's made too simple, not that layered, and I think very few players will actually use it to its full potential. By building up your combos, a silver meter will fill up underneath your health. When fully maxed, you can activate extremely powerful special attacks that basically take out all the enemies around you. I find myself forgetting about them most times, in all honesty. Much like in Spider-Man 2, hero points are earned through experience as you complete story missions and various side objectives. The upgrade store is easily accessible through the pause menu, which is an improvement over Spider-Man 2 in my opinion. I found having to go to actual store locations on the map to be tedious and unnecessary. Crime patrols are the primary side objectives in Spider-Man 3. They are initiated by finding informants throughout the city and become incredibly repetitive. The developers try their best to vary the tasks you do in them, taking out assassins, protecting bank trucks, preventing robberies, disarming bombs, finding evidence, but given the limitations, this game being on older, deteriorating hardware, everything about them feels so crudely assembled. Like you'll have a random shipping container sitting in the middle of nowhere. You'll open it, and the camera will focus on Spider-Man, so as not to show the quest item appearing out of thin air. Character models and the voices that come out of them are reused very frequently. The city just feels so artificial and basic. Spider-Man 3 implements gang warfare. The map is littered with crime wave icons for each of the featured gangs: the Waste Tribe, H-Bombers, Apocalypse, and Dragon Tails. Defeating each wave will take it over for the NYPD, and at several points throughout the game, you will need to play a few to learn more information to unlock the next story mission, which is annoying. I don't know what the point would be to beat all of them and conquer the entire city for the police. I doubt you get anything of significance for it. It seems like it'd be a big waste of time. Another thing that's kind of a waste of time are the collectibles. There are 100 meteorite fragments scattered throughout the city. If you collect them all, you get a congratulatory message that factors into your completion percentage. That's it. They do give you some extra XP, and collecting ones you come across throughout your playthrough is beneficial to purchase upgrades, but there isn't a whole lot of incentive to scour the map and find them all. Same goes for the 50 spider emblems. They unlock unlimited usage of the black suit post-game, but if you want to play as the black suit, you might as well just restart the story. Moving on to the story of this game, it's very bare bones, can be completed in a few short hours, and only hits on a couple major moments from the film it's based on. It's a pretty weak adaptation, all things considered, far weaker than its PS3 counterpart. It begins with a tutorial level where the H-Bombers are attempting to destroy the Carlisle building. The H-Bombers are being led by the former CEO of Carlisle Industries, Lucas Carlisle, whose company had been shut down following pollution claims made by the Daily Bugle. Carlisle, going by the name of Mad Bomber, a very obscure villain from Marvel Comics, seeks revenge on the city, committing acts of terrorism and going after J. Jonah Jameson personally. The section of the game focused on the Mad Bomber consists of you beating up his armored goons and disarming his numerous explosives. At one point, good old JJJ has a collar placed around his neck by Carlisle and is thrown out of a helicopter. Spider-Man catches him and you are forced to follow the helicopter, keeping it in range so the collar doesn't go off and kill Jonah. It's kind of a neat sequence that forces Spider-Man to protect the one man who hates him more than anyone, and seeing Jameson squirm, Spider-Man being his only hope of survival, is really funny. The boss battle with Mad Bomber is straightforward. You throw his missiles back at his suit to cause his force field to malfunction. You attack him a few times. His shield comes back up. Rinse and repeat. You get the picture. Blaming Spider-Man for the death of his father Norman, Peter's best friend Harry goes after him, discovering his father's hideout and becoming the new Goblin. Though I like the character arc Harry has in these movies, I've always believed making him some form of hobgoblin would have worked better, would have looked better. I hate his mask and snowboard-shaped glider in Spider-Man 3. The one and only villain encounter you have with New Goblin in this game happens early on, following a date with MJ, and in the PS2 version it's very rough looking. The character models have very little detail to them, block-like hands. You have to steer Harry's glider clear of traffic, and then, through a series of quick-time events, make him attack and destroy his own glider, causing him to crash in a nearby alleyway. He is taken to the hospital, but doesn't appear again until the final mission of the game, when he has a change of heart, forgiving Peter for the death of his father, realizing it was his own demons that did him in, and helps his friend against Sandman and Venom. Kurt Connors, played by Dylan Baker in Spider-Man 2 and 3, takes a regenerative serum in this game that transforms him into the monstrous lizard, something we sadly didn't get to witness in the Sam Raimi films. Lizard men sightings pop up all over New York, and you get to take photo evidence of them for the Bugle, as they terrorize civilians or steal from food carts. It may sound funny, but it's actually quite boring, because the environments in this game, especially Central Park, are just lame and unattractive to look at. You learn that Connors has been creating these lizard men from his lab and chase him through the city streets. Some of the camera angles in this segment are downright ugly. You corner him in the sewers, battling more of his reptilian minions, as well as the lizard himself, before fighting an even larger version of him, the giant mega lizard that you have to hop onto and direct into electrical generators, keeping your balance with the analog stick. It's quite awkward. During your trek through the sewers, you also encounter Kraven, who has been hunting and killing these lizard creatures. Spider-Man tries to convince him to stop, saying they were innocent people before being involuntarily transformed, but of course, all Kraven lives for is the thrill of the hunt. He doesn't care. The lizard is just a trophy to him. The most noteworthy additions to this game villain-wise would have to be Morbius and Shriek. They were exclusive to the Wii, PSP, and PS2 versions of Spider-Man 3. Just like the comics, Morbius suffers from a form of pseudo-vampirism, though in the game it's the result of a lab accident and not a fatal blood disease. At least, I don't think it is. The first fight you have against Morbius is pretty dull. You have to web him up between these pillars on a roof to stall for time until the sun rises. Near the end of it, I didn't even get to play anymore. The game kept repeating this identical quick-time event over and over again, one that was so easy a monkey could do it with one hand while picking his ass with the other. You take the weakened Morbius to Dr. Connors' lab in an attempt to cure him, and Connors recognizes him as the world-renowned biochemist Michael Morbius. You learn through Morbius that his wife, Shriek, had inadvertently caused his transformation. She had been enhanced herself by an alien symbiote, presumably the same kind that attached itself to Peter earlier in the game after crash landing on Earth. Shriek would ally with the Waste Tribe and use magical incantations with a large obelisk to control the minds of civilians. Your first encounter with her has you tricking her to shoot 4 satellite dishes around the obelisk, removing its shield, before pulling out several shards on each side of it that power its magic. The only hope for Morbius' survival lies within his wife. You carry him to her hideout in broad daylight, which is hilarious, after learning that the sun can kill him. When you arrive, she rejuvenates him and you are forced to fight them both at the same time. This boss battle is one of the better ones in the game. You need to open the warehouse windows to stun Morbius, and each time his health is depleted and he is healed by Shriek, her own health meter is affected. Eventually, Shriek starts playing mind games with Spider-Man. You see visions of Mary Jane and hallucinations of other supporting characters like Jameson, Harry, and Connors that attack you. It's only through the power of the black suit that Peter is able to defeat Shriek. Speaking of the black suit, I think it's as good a time as any to talk about what it brings to the table in this game. Just like in the film, Peter is covered by an alien symbiote, which creates an all-black version of his Spider-Man costume. You can switch to it at any time once it's unlocked, and it greatly enhances the damage of your attacks. You do have a time restriction on how long you can use it though, as it will slowly corrupt Peter the longer he has it on. If you refuse to take it off, the screen will be completely covered and you will fail your mission. Removing it involves a series of quick-time events, which get harder and harder the more times you use the suit and the further you progress in the story. There is a cooldown period before you can put it on again, and changing into the black suit completely resets your silver momentum gauge, so keep that in mind before using it. Honestly, I think the symbiote was implemented really well in this game, better than it was in the next-gen version in fact, because you get to freely switch between the two costumes, and the corruptible nature of the symbiote bleeds over into the gameplay a little bit. My only complaint would be the fact that there are no separate upgrades attached to the black suit here. It gives you more damage and different animations to your combos, but disappointingly, that's all. Other Spider-Man games like Web of Shadows for example, or the recently released Spider-Man 2 from Insomniac would provide far more unique gameplay features for the black suit. Anyways, just like in the movie, Dr. Connors would study a piece of the symbiote for Peter, realizing the danger it poses to anyone who wears it. Peter's behavior would quickly change. He is easily angered, becomes more aggressive against criminals, and even abuses MJ, causing her to break up with him. You thought emo Peter was bad. Listen to some of this dialogue and line delivery in this game.
You've hardly said 3 words all night. Is everything all right?
I figured you were talking enough for both of us.
Peter, what's gotten into you lately?
Nothing that stopping your gums from flapping wouldn't solve.
During an encounter in the subway with an escaped convict named Flint Marco, who had fallen into a particle accelerator which fused his body to the sand surrounding it, Peter would nearly kill him while wearing the black suit, needing it to do damage to him, and using its power to break open a pipe to wash the villain away with water. Following your encounter with Shriek and her abilities, Peter realizes that the symbiote is vulnerable to sound, and goes to the cathedral to use the sound of the church bell to tear the suit off his body. The weakened symbiote then falls onto photographer Eddie Brock, who had recently lost his job at the Daily Bugle, posing as Spider-Man to take phony pictures. Brock becomes the newest supervillain in New York, Venom. Now, Venom is made a bit beefier here than he was in the movie, which is appreciated, but Topher Grace is still voicing him. He's made way too playful and quippy. I hate this version of the character. We all do. None of it fits. And Venom's mouth moves like a fucking sock puppet in these cutscenes. It's horrible. Venom would blackmail Sandman to team up with him and take out Spider-Man, threatening to murder his daughter Penny if he refuses. The final mission in this game taking place at the construction site, where the villains have kidnapped Mary Jane, is heavily compromised compared to the one found in the next-gen version of the game. Instead of it all taking place within the partially constructed building as seen in the film, it all just happens in the nearby dirt pit, a simple confined square. I do like the idea of it being a boss gauntlet though. You fight Venom and Sandman twice, alternating between them both with different gimmicks in each. Sandman's first battle has him surrounded with a sand tornado he's creating. It's pretty easy to avoid, and after a while he distances himself from you. When an opening appears, you need to stun him with canisters flying through the air. The first fight against Venom is honestly the most challenging of the four, in my opinion, because you have a time limit to beat him. He has a couple phases, and the last one has a symbiote shielding him from most attacks, but you can cheese the vault move and sneak in a few quick cheap shots on him until Harry comes in and slashes him with his sword to calm the symbiote back down. After Sandman is tricked by Venom, believing Spider-Man had killed his daughter, he becomes enraged and absorbs a large quantity of sand from the construction site to grow larger. His attacks get very repetitive. It's a mindless boss battle. You just have to wait until the game prompts you to throw 4 explosive barrels into him. You're waiting through what feels like minutes of the same slow attack animation over and over again. He's only got one. The barrels detonate and Harry is killed in the explosion when Venom web throws him into Sandman's body. That's how Harry dies in this game. It's very anticlimactic. There's no touching final moment with Peter and MJ. It's awful. Anywho, the last battle of the game is against Venom, obviously. You don't have Harry to help you this time, he's too busy being dead, but there is no time limit anymore because MJ is safe, and when the Venom symbiote starts to act up, you simply use an environmental weapon in the form of a steel girder Spider-Man slams into the ground to make noise to stun him. Afterwards, Eddie is killed, overwhelmed by the symbiote, and just falls over and dies. Again, another lazy death. Overall, the final boss of this game is a joke, extremely easy with the broken vault maneuver. It pales in comparison to Doc Ock from Spider-Man 2, and if I have to hear Topher Grace say one man's trash is another man's treasure one more goddamn time, I think I'm gonna fucking lose it.
What is it they say about things you throw away? One man's trash is another man's treasure.
Clearly, Spider-Man 3 on the PlayStation 2 is nowhere near as pretty to look at as its next-gen version, back when being next-gen really felt like next-gen. It's a prime example of publishers and developers abandoning older hardware in favor of the new. Understandable from a business standpoint, but also shameful knowing that the PS2 was capable of a lot more. That being said though, even with its limitations and various setbacks, I don't think it's terrible. Definitely not one of the worst superhero games I've played. While its mechanics do feel like a step backwards in areas compared to its predecessor, it can still be a bit of fun at times. I just don't think it's aged very well. It's quite barren in terms of story and replayability, and unless you are an old-school gaming connoisseur like myself, you aren't going to get a whole lot out of it at this point. There really isn't any reason to play it over its more advanced version on the PS3, which in my opinion is the definitive version of Spider-Man 3 in video game form, despite its flaws as well. Spider-Man 3 on the PlayStation 2 will always have a special place in my heart. I have fond memories surrounding it. It was the only version of the game I had access to when Spider-Man 3 hit theaters in mid-2007. I didn't get my first PS3 until late 2008, and by then I was moving on to other Spider-Man games like Web of Shadows. Movie license games were slowly becoming a thing of the past too. In a few years after this, development on them ceased altogether on home consoles. Games were just becoming too big and too expensive to make. Their development windows couldn't line up with the immense frequency of releases of superhero films, especially once the MCU got started. So yeah, the PS2 version of Spider-Man 3 was all I knew for the longest time. It wasn't until recent years, after I started collecting older games and consoles, that I played its PS3 counterpart for the first time. Like I said, I do think it's the definitive way to play Spider-Man 3 in video game form, but I don't know if I'd call it the strongest Spider-Man film-to-game adaptation of the Sam Raimi trilogy, despite its technical advancements. It has a few problems in its own right, which I will get to in my next game-related video, so stay tuned. I want to thank you very much for watching my review of Spider-Man 3 on the PlayStation 2. If you've played it, let me know your thoughts on the game down in the comments section below. Hell, let me know what you think of the Spider-Man 3 movie as well. I'll try to join the discussion where and when I can. If you'd like to support the channel and everything it is that I do, please subscribe, hit that bell icon for notifications, and become a producer over on Patreon if you can. Every pledge made keeps this channel and its content alive. I will see you all in the next one. Take care, and always stay nerdy. We're gonna move on now to what is, in my opinion, the definitive video game adaptation of Spider-Man 3, released for 7th generation consoles in May of 2007. While its graphics are primitive, the very early days of the era, when character models looked great, but environments were very basic, spacious, and lacked polish, from a tech standpoint, it is the most adept of all its versions, spanning all platforms, and is the most accurate in recreating the events of the film it's based on. As movie-licensed superhero games go, Spider-Man 3 is one of the stronger ones out there if you ask me. In fact, I still think it's one of the best Spider-Man games in general, despite its flaws, which I will get into. If you've watched my previous review on its last-gen counterpart, then you would know that the PS3 version of Spider-Man 3 passed me by when it first came out. It wasn't until recent years that I played this game for the first time, and capturing it for this video was the first time I've ever fully completed it from start to finish. The controls in it impressed me. They feel like a natural and solid continuation of the ones found in Spider-Man 2 from the previous generation. You can run by holding L2 and charge up your jump, temporarily run up walls by pressing L2 and circle when you make contact with them, and the web swinging has been expanded, made far more responsive and tight than in the PS2 port of the game, which felt very sticky. By this point, the web swinging was moving in the right direction in these Spider-Man games. The controls were becoming more fluid, and it honestly started getting really fun. You really felt like you were Spider-Man swinging through New York City. As long as you are close enough to a building, holding R2 shoots out a web line. Tapping it performs a trusty web zip. By holding L2 down during a swing arc, you can boost yourself to move faster, and holding the X button builds height. If you've played Web of Shadows from 2008, a lot of these swing animations will look familiar to you. Most of them were recycled for that game. I think Spider-Man 3 has easily the best web-swinging system in any movie-licensed Spider-Man game, before and after it. Like I said at the start, this was the early days of the 7th generation, so while the graphics are better, there is still a lot of room for improvement. Texture popping was an issue, screen tearing was commonplace, and a lot more detail could be added to the environments overall. The city of New York definitely feels more alive in this one than it did on the PS2 though, and the buildings have a lot more variety to their shapes and colors. The buildings in the PS2 game felt very basic, like cardboard boxes that had been copied and pasted 100 times over. Every rooftop was a simple square or rectangle. Very few had additional features attached to them. Here, we see that a lot more work has been put into it. The city has far more personality to it, as it should. It's New York, for Christ's sake. Another aspect of the gameplay that feels like it builds upon what had come before is the combat. The controls for it are virtually identical to what was in Spider-Man 2, and many of the punch and kick animations are similar as well. I don't think it's as enjoyable as that fighting system though. I do like the use of the blue spider reflexes meter, activated by holding L1 to perform dodges when the yellow fist icon appears over the heads of enemies, and I also like the red spherical meter between your health and spider reflexes that allows you to do devastating special attacks on groups of enemies once it begins flashing. But when you are forced to fight large numbers of enemies, things can get a bit overwhelming. The camera will move all over the place, and the weight of everything feels very floppy. That's the best word I can use to describe it. While I find the combat in this game to be better than in the PS2 version, it can still be really awkward at times, and some encounters in this game can get rather difficult. 1 second you have full health, and the next you're essentially dead, which is why it's imperative that you earn yourself the 2 health upgrades this game provides for you after beating enough crime waves and side missions involving the various gangs threatening the city. You need to reduce their presence in each zone. Speaking of which, the PS3 version of Spider-Man 3 features an additional gang, Arsenic Candy, a bunch of young women wielding sledgehammers, weaponized umbrellas that wear frilly miniskirts, and rob teddy bear factories. You think I'm joking? I'm not fucking joking. Spider-Man 3 implements Spider-Man's spider sense that acts almost like the detective vision in the Batman Arkham games, allowing you to see highlighted enemies and follow clue trails. Problem is, it only stays on for a few seconds before automatically turning off, meaning you constantly have to turn it back on, which is annoying. I get that the developers may not have wanted you to abuse it, but then again, it really doesn't show you all that much anyway. At least not to the extent of Batman Arkham, so why does it matter? If you're not gonna let me keep it on, then don't make me follow trails of footprints that last several minutes at a time. It seems counterintuitive. And speaking of counterintuitive, the controller prompts in this game can get really confusing during a few sequences. Hitting square and circle repeatedly to lift objects is one thing, but then you have to hit a swinging chandelier by holding and releasing square at intervals. Other parts have Spider-Man slingshotting himself with his web. Based on what appears on screen, one would assume you hold the left analog stick down, but you actually have to flick it down several times quickly before letting go at a specific moment. And I don't think I have to be the one to tell you that this feels terrible, kinda hurts the thumbs. I ended up putting the controller on my lap or holding it like a cell phone and used all my fingers on the other hand to move it. It was the only way I could do it fast enough. It's ridiculous. Who thought that was okay to program? The story in this game doesn't play out in a straightforward linear fashion, like in many other Spider-Man games. It consists of several mission chains. Each of the main story missions are unlocked after beating enough side missions, mostly related to gang activity, but of course, some involve side characters and side villains from the comics as well. One has you uncover a gun-running ring and take photo evidence of police corruption for Detective Gene DeWolf. If that name sounds familiar, it's because DeWolf was a notable ally of Spider-Man in the late 1970s and early 80s, who was killed at the hands of the Sin Eater in the iconic 1985-86 story arc, The Death of Gene DeWolf. In the game, she is found out by her crooked partners and shot, but manages to survive thanks to Spider-Man. I feel having DeWolf die in the game, much like in the comics, while it would have been predictable, would have added some more layers to the story, and further negatively impact Peter's psychological state, on top of what the symbiote ends up doing to him. He could have gone on an investigation to find the murderer, emphasize the more violent change in his behavior even more than what we got in the game, maybe even include Sin Eater as another one of the side villains too. too, but I can see the developers feeling that would be a bit much, and that DeWolf's death may have taken attention away from the events of the Spider-Man 3 film the game was trying to adapt, so I'm not gonna dock it too many points for that. There's a couple side missions that have you take Mary Jane on a series of thrill rides on progressively harder difficulty levels. There's a time limit to get her to her destination. You need to swing higher, lower, or perform tricks, depending on what she wants Peter to do to earn points. You can also collect giant floating hearts that are scattered around. It's a bit cringy, to be perfectly honest, and the voice acting doesn't help matters. Later on in the game, when Peter's behavior has been influenced by the black suit, the thrill ride becomes a scare ride. The waypoints have you swinging more erratically, higher, and in different directions, until MJ has had enough and breaks up with Peter for being such a huge asshole. I don't blame her. Not cool, bro. Not cool. A few of the side villains carry over from the PS2 version. Luke Carlisle, the Mad Bomber, has a score to settle with J. Jonah Jameson for printing a story that ruined his company. His missions put an emphasis on disarming explosives, which consist of consecutive mini-games, leaning into Peter's brilliance and problem-solving skills. While fun, they never reach incredibly challenging levels. I always found myself having plenty of time left over, and some of the mini-games feel very unnecessary from a gameplay perspective, just there for the sake of it and nothing else. Fighting the Mad Bomber's jetpack goons is hilarious. You hop on their backs and steer them into nearby walls to damage them. It looks goofy and janky as hell, but never gets old. Unlike the PS2 port of the game, you never battle Carlisle himself, just his military helicopter while saving Jonah with the bomb collar strapped around his neck. You have to wait until the copter shoots a large missile at you that you throw back at it using your spider reflexes. You then hide behind the various rooftop structures to avoid its machine gun fire, and then web zip to escape the countless smaller missiles it fires at you. Rinse and repeat. The part of the story centering around Dr. Kurt Connors the Lizard is far more interesting than it was in the PS2 version of Spider-Man 3. Connors transforms into his monstrous counterpart all the same, and turns innocent New Yorkers into his lizard minions out of a lab built in the sewers. After you cure him, the game takes the time to show the heroes undoing the lizard's damage. Using a serum of Connors' design, Spider-Man returns underground to turn the remaining lizard creatures back into humans. I also like how the PS3 version explores a bit more of Connor's psychological trauma, the nightmares he has of the lizard, and the guilt he feels over what he has done. Along the way, you battle Kraven the Hunter as well, who has traveled to New York to hunt Connors and the rest of the lizard creatures. In this version of the game, he is accompanied by Calypso, who uses her potions and charms to assist him. The Kraven fight is much stronger than it was on the PS2. I like how he takes on the characteristics and abilities of various animals, with a translucent form of armor representing them, covering his upper body. I like the inclusion of the priestess Calypso too. She's a bit more obscure. Calypso's magic is what causes the lizard to turn into Mega Lizard in this version of the game, so it's given more context and doesn't just happen at complete random. Instead of riding Mega Lizard into the 4 generators, you have to throw him using your web, and it can be a real pain in the ass lining it up and getting the timing right with the analog stick. It took me multiple attempts. There are a few villains in this game that were exclusive to the next-gen versions of Spider-Man 3. The first is Mac Gargan, the Scorpion. He's made into a tragic anti-hero, sort of like the character's appearance in the original movie's tie-in game, though this one is not meant to be the same character. A bit of a missed opportunity there, in my opinion. Gargan is the test subject of a cybernetics company called Mecha Biocon, which to my knowledge only exists within this game and is not found in the comics. The company is run by a female version of scientist Farley Stillwell, the one responsible for creating Scorpion in the comics. Another scientist, the one in charge of the Scorpion Project, is named Dr. Andrews, who has developed a close relationship with Gargan over time. Whether it's romantic or not is not made clear. Gargan has been blackmailed by Stillwell, forced into becoming a brainwashed bounty hunter for her and her company. Scorpion's design in this game is rather ugly. I'm not a fan of it. It's obviously made more mechanical looking. He has a scythe-like tail, drills that come out of his hands, and a plexiglass visor that covers his eyes. Infiltrating Mecha Biocon is a hassle. Navigating it isn't fun. Inside the facility, you play this bizarre minigame as Scorpion, earning a high score in order to shut down a few security measures. Escaping the facility while all the blast doors are closing is tough, because the camera fights against you. It's your worst enemy. Thank God you can slow down time with your spider reflexes. After chasing Scorpion to a bridge, you battle him, and awkwardly as all hell, use the energy blast from his tail to destroy a series of generators powering the machine that is causing his brainwashing. Eventually, Scorpion becomes your ally, ditches his costume, and teams up with you to return to Mecha Biocon to enact his revenge against Stillwell. It's here where you battle Rhino, another one of the company's experiments, and another character in this game with an ugly-ass design. It's grody. Once Rhino is defeated, Gargan attempts to kill Stillwell, but after some convincing from Spider-Man and Dr. Andrews, he just runs away instead and is never heard from again. The developers tried to do something cool and compelling with Scorpion here, provide a bit more backstory for him, a tragic element to it all, but his mission chain only manages to scratch the surface with these ideas. So much more could have been done with him in this game, and really, I was left unsatisfied with his section. It lasted far too long as well. And finally, after completing all of the mission chains for all the gangs in the city, you go to a press conference and learn that the one controlling them all is none other than Wilson Fisk, the kingpin of crime. You battle the combined might of the gangs, who disrupt the conference, and then go to Fisk's penthouse to put an end to all of the gang violence once and for all. There's a sequence here where you fight 3 of the gang leaders at once, which is pretty tricky. Once you get through them, you take on Kingpin himself. I'd say this is one of the better Kingpins in video games. Breaking into his penthouse and causing all this damage to it is awesome. He also fucks up Spider-Man, slamming him through walls, concrete pillars, and tossing him downstairs. The 2 boss battles you have with him back to back kinda suck though. All you do is hold L1 to activate your spider reflexes and counter his attacks. It's the best strategy because if he does land any hits, he does a lot of damage. Some of the grab animations are really cool though. Kingpin does feel shoehorned into this game. He doesn't get a whole lot of dialogue. There isn't a whole lot of context provided as to why he shows up in the story. Your fight against him occurs later in the game, after Spider-Man has been affected by the symbiote. After you beat him, Spider-Man throws him out a large window to the streets below. He wonders if Fisk could have survived the fall, but he doesn't think it matters and moves on. I know the suit has been making Peter reckless and aggressive, but it still feels wrong hearing that sort of thing come out of Spider-Man's mouth, and it's not like the game shows us that Kingpin is alive. For all we know, he really did fall to his death. Spider-Man killed him and doesn't care. Not a good look for the character. Alright, let's get into the main story, what was adapted from the Spider-Man 3 film, and how it differs from the last-gen version of the game I looked at. Harry's pissed at Peter over the death of his father, the Green Goblin, and goes after him, wanting blood. The fight against him in this game is much, much better. You have to fight him on his snowboard-looking glider after he ambushes you. dodging his attacks, and then matching the button prompt shown to deal damage of your own, the fight on the glider does last a bit too long in my opinion and becomes a little boring, seeing as it is just a bunch of quick time events. But once New Goblin's health drops low enough, you are knocked off the glider and the fight turns to the streets. You can run around and swing through the city with New Goblin and his glider hot on your tail, which makes for a neat visual. I wonder how many people, if any, would recognize Peter or would remember his face though moving forward. That could be a problem, at least it's nighttime. After defeating New Goblin, Harry is knocked out far more accurately to how he was in the film, hitting his head and not just crashing off screen like he does in the PS2 port. You actually carry him to the hospital to treat his amnesia as well, something the PS2 game didn't even address. Just like in the movie, an alien symbiote that crash-landed on Earth bonds with Peter while he sleeps and creates a black version of his Spider-Man costume. The alien entity slowly corrupts him, enhancing his negative characteristics, making Peter dangerously aggressive towards his enemies and those around him. Not only does his relationship spiral with MJ, like I previously mentioned, but you see some other sleazy, disrespectful behavior from Peter as well, like putting his feet up on Jonah's desk and forcing himself onto Betty Brant briefly, which is gross. As much as I love the inclusion of the symbiote suit in this game, and graphically it looks pretty decent, far better than it did in the PS2 version, I don't think it was implemented as strongly. You don't have the option to switch to it at any time. You only wear it when the game needs you to wear it, and remove it when the story requires you to take it off. It doesn't have its own unique attack animations or combos. Aside from a rage meter replacing the special attack one, it just feels like a simple reskin of the regular suit, pretty bland and uninspired compared to some other Spider-Man games we've gotten over the years. Anywho, after Peter is bonded with the symbiote, he encounters Flint Marko, the Sandman, for the first time. He chases the villain into the subway tunnels, and the fight between the two men is pretty violent, ending in Spider-Man bursting open a pipe and washing Sandman away. I would have loved it if Peter had said good riddance like he does in the movie, but sadly, no. Late in the game's story, we are introduced to Eddie Brock, a rival photographer of Peter's at the Daily Bugle, looking to provide evidence that Spider-Man is a criminal. He goes to take pictures of the wall crawler in the act of stealing. Unlike the PS2 game that had Brock believably dressed somewhat in a black Spider-Man suit trying to nab a purse, here he just gets some random fat guy with his belly poking out to put on the classic red and blue costume, not the one worn by Spider-Man in the falsified pictures from the film. I don't find the joke that funny, and anyone believing this to be the real Spider-Man would be a moron. Spider-Man arrives to knock Brock out and steal his camera, but then you have to find the rest of his cameras on fire escapes, rooftops, and the sides of buildings that he had planted as well. I'd like to know just how in the fuck he managed to reach some of these places. When did he find the time? All of it is just so ridiculous that it's dumb. Peter's behavior becomes too much, and realizing that the symbiote is to blame for it, he goes to a nearby church, and using the sonic vibrations of its bell, is able to remove the alien from his body. The symbiote lands on Brock down below, and he transforms into Venom. He would confront Sandman in a park and blackmail him into helping him kill Spider-Man, threatening to kill his daughter Penny if he doesn't cooperate. They use a slightly different vocal effect for Venom in this game than they did for the PS2 version. I think it sounds worse and makes him harder to understand.
Freak? I'm the freak. Have you looked in the mirror lately? Now, let's talk about how we're going to destroy the spider.
Freak? I'm the freak. Have you looked in the mirror lately? Now, let's talk about how we're going to destroy the spider.
The grand finale in the PS3 game is far more accurate to the film than its last-gen counterpart, taking place in and around the partially constructed building and not just in some nearby sandlot. I am hesitant to call it better though for a few reasons. The villains kidnap Mary Jane and lure Spider-Man out with a message on live TV. Harry is watching and decides to come to his friend's aid. It's here where you get to play as the new Goblin. He was a DLC character you could fly around as after beating the story in free roam, but during the main game, you only play as him in the final mission. The novelty wears off pretty quick though, because his control is utter horseshit. By default, it uses the motion control of the PS3 controller, which is an absolute nightmare. I hated when games used it. I've mentioned it numerous times before. It was terrible. Harry goes to save MJ from the suspended taxicab while Peter is distracted fighting Venom. As New Goblin, you take on the giant Sandman, using a fire hydrant to moisten him, and then using your pumpkin bombs and razor bats to damage him. It might not seem like it, but the boss battle with Sandman at the end of the game is the worst in Spider-Man 3 in my eyes, because all it is you mashing buttons and moving the analog stick back and forth for like 5 minutes. As Spider-Man, you do battle with Venom, with the encounter being split up and sandwiching the fight you have with Sandman. You attack him until the symbiote is angered, and then stun it using the sound of infinitely respawning stacked pipes that are strewn around the various levels of the building. It is now time that I go into one of this game's more irredeemable aspects that has aged it a great deal, and the main reason I can't see myself playing it a whole lot in the future. Its overuse of QuickTime events. QTEs should never have been a thing in video games. They were never fun, never injected any sense of realism or immersion to the games you were playing. They were, and unfortunately still are, a lazy and stupid gimmick that I feel shows a complete disregard for gamers with disabilities, and those with poor reaction time in general, which I hate to break it to you, gets worse and worse as you age. You should always have the option to turn QTEs off in video games, at the very least. The two QuickTime event sequences at the end of Spider-Man 3, the one with New Goblin against Sandman and the one with Spider-Man against Venom, are excruciating. Most of the QTEs throughout the game are relatively simple and straightforward, but these require immensely precise timing. I can't tell you how many times I had to retry them. The memorization I had to do through trial and error was insane. Each time I would get 1 or 2 steps farther and have to restart all over again, and each failure results in your character taking damage. Eventually, you would have to play the entire boss fight again just to get another attempt at it. If you manage to get through them though, in the final one against Venom, you witness his death, a much darker one than in the movie and PS2 game, with him getting impaled on steel rods. I wasn't expecting it. Flint Marko is then reunited with his daughter Penny. Just like in the last-gen version of the game, there is no mention of Marko playing a role in the death of Uncle Ben like in the film. I think that was a missed opportunity. As much hate as it gets sometimes, I actually liked it. I thought it gave Marko a great arc, very emotional, and Peter got some closure too. It was a nice way to wrap up the trilogy. After beating the game, you unlock the ability to switch to black-suited Spider-Man at any time, and can replay the entire game wearing it if you want to, a form of New Game Plus. Despite its serious issues with its over-reliance on QuickTime events, especially at the end, Spider-Man 3 can still be a really fun time. I found myself enjoying it a lot more than I thought I was going to. It is an early 7th generation title. It is a bit primitive in areas. You can tell the developers didn't have a firm grasp of the hardware, but I do think it's one of the stronger Spider-Man games out there, movie licensed especially. especially. The original Spider-Man trilogy is probably the best series of games based on a series of superhero films that has ever been made. Arguably, each game got progressively better from a graphical and mechanical standpoint. They came out at a time when developers were actually trying with movie-licensed superhero games. I think it was when they were at their absolute peak. This has been NerdGasm. Let me know your thoughts on the official Spider-Man 3 movie tie-in game down in the comments section below. If you'd like to show your support for my channel and its content, think about subscribing and become a producer over on Patreon if you can. If there are any superhero or comic book related video games you'd like me to take a look at in the future, you can nominate them over on Patreon as well. I will see you all in the next one. Take care. Thanks for watching, and always stay nerdy.